What's up, everybody? This is Jay, and this is Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 2 recap for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Let's get into it. Now, when it starts off, we see Jaime getting questioned by Daenerys, and she's saying, I remember my brother telling me a story of what we would do when we find the man that killed our father. And he's saying, look, we were at war. The things I did, I would do again. It was for my house. You want me to apologize? I'm not. And so she said, is that right? And then Tyrion tried to step up and speak up for him. He said, listen, my brother, he knew very well what he was going to get into if he came here, and he came the same. And then Sansa said, yeah, but what about our father? You tried to attack him in the street. You tried to destroy our house. And then Bran said, the things we do for love. And right then, Jaime didn't have a comeback. He was shook. He was speechless. And he just looked Bran while Bran stared him down. And he put his head down. And then Brienne got up and she's like, I know, Sir Jaime. He does have honor. When I was captured, he spoke up for me when they tried to force themselves upon me and lost his hand because of it. And Sansa said, so you vouch for this man? And she said, yeah, I do. And she said, so you'll fight beside this man? And then she said, yes, I will. And she said, okay, well, I do trust you with my life. And then Daenerys said, what does the Warden of the North think? He said, well, we need every man we can get. And they said, well, your sister said she was sending an army. And she said, no, she's not sending one. And so then she gave Grey Worm the sword, and he gave him a chance to, walk off. And then she was salty because Tyrion was fooled by the sister. When they walked off, she looked at Jon, but he turned and left her hanging. He still don't know what to say after he found out the news. And so when she was walking in the hallway, she's saying, I thought your sister was supposed to be sending an army. Either you was a fool or you working with him. He like, I'm a fool. And then she said, well, maybe I need to find another hand. And he said, I guess you guys will be wearing this before this is over. Meanwhile, we see Gendry in the blacksmith, and he's creating weapons, and we see Arya staring at him, checking him out with a little smile on her face. She still like him. And then she walks up to him and says, where's my weapon? And when you make it stronger than this. He said, this is strong enough. And then she smiled at his work, and then she sees the blades. He said, I'll make it after I make a few thousand more of these. She said, no, you make my weapon, and I need you to make it now. It's more important than these. And she said, what about these men? Have you fought them? He said, I fought them, and they're very, very bad. She said, that's it. And she started throwing the daggers right into the post. He like, damn, she's good. And she said, very, very bad. I'm sure you could do better than that. He said, I've seen death, and this is really death. It's bad. And she said, okay, well, I've seen death, and I'm looking forward to it. At the same time, she's throwing these daggers into the post, and he's like, damn, she's a little killer now. She said, make my weapon, and make sure you do that. And he said, right away. And so meanwhile, we see Bran in the Godswood, and Jaime comes up to talk to him, and he says, so how come you didn't tell them about what happened? He said, well, if I told them, how could you help us if you were dead? He said, well, I understand. I'm sorry for what I did to you. And he said, you wasn't sorry before? He says, Jaime says, well, I'm a different man now. He said, Bran says, well, so am I. He said, you're not Brandon Stark anymore? He said, not really. Meanwhile, Tyrion waddling around through the courtyard, and then he bumps into Jaime, and he says, well, we meet again. He said, yeah. He said, and the natives rejoice. And then one of the guys, they spit on the ground at him while they were looking. And he says, well, at least my sister won't have the chance to kill me. That'd be good. And so they were laughing and talking or whatever, reminiscing. And he said, so she not sending the troops? I thought she was sending them. Did she lie about everything? Did she lie about the baby? He said, no, she didn't lie about the baby. And she said she basically has a good way of using the truth to tell lies. And he said, oh, well, I see. And he said, well, remember that at least we have each other. And so then they go back upstairs and they're looking, and then over the yard, and then Jaime sees Brienne. And so then Tyrion was talking about how he planned on dying with a belly full of wine at the age of 80 with a whore around his cock. And Jaime like, all right. And then he goes down there and he sees Podrick is a good fighter now, training. Brienne is smiling because she's taught him well. He comes and talks to her. He says, Brienne. And then she says, Sir Jaime. And he says, she says, what are you doing? He says, what do you mean? She says, you never spoken to me this long without insulting me. Jaime said, you want me to insult you? And Brienne says, no. He says, look, I'm not the fighter I once was, but it'll be my honor to fight under your command. And then she didn't know what to say, and she walked off. Meanwhile, Daenerys is sitting there, and she's counseling with Ser Jorah, and he said, look, when you named Tyrion your hand, it broke my heart. I wanted to be your hand. She says, yeah, but at the time I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. And I needed his expertise. He said, yes, I know. She said, I didn't think you liked him very much. He says, no, I didn't. But she said, he's made mistake after mistake. He said, yeah, but we have all. But he's good at what he does. And so she goes to talk to Lady Sansa. And she was talking to Lord Royce. So Sansa and the Royce finished the talk. And then she talking. She says, my queen. And so she says, let me talk. And she says, I know I should have apologized and thank you when you came to help us fight. And she says, it's okay. And then Sansa says, so did Jon get you to come because he loves you, convince you, or is it the other way around? And she says, well, actually, who convinced who? I'm here fighting for Jon because I love him. And he brought me and my armies north for him. If anything, I'm here because he convinced me. And so they smile a little bit, and then they, have a little girl talk for a second. And then the maester says it's an important person they need to see. And so then they go into the hall, and lo and behold, it's Theon. And so Theon says, Daenerys asked, where's his sister? And he told her that she went back to the Iron Islands to defend it, and if they need a place to escape. And then she said, so why are you here? He said, I want to fight for Lady Sansa in Winterfell. And then Sansa almost broke down in tears. And they hugged because they both were tortured by Ramsay together, so they got a special bond. Plus, neither one of them got nuts. Meanwhile, we see Sir Devos, and he's feeding up a lot of the locals. And one of the guys is like, man, I'm not a soldier, and I don't know what to fight. He said, look, I've survived 2 battles, and I don't know anything about combat experience. And meanwhile, we see Gilly, and she looks like she's pregnant in real life, and she's telling the ladies where to go and be in the crypts. And then we see this one lady with a burnt face look like Princess Shireen, and Devos was serving up a bowl of brown, and she said, I want to fight, I don't want to be in the crypts. And then Gilly came and said, I'm going to be in the crypts with my son. I'd feel better if you were there with me. And she said, all right, I'll go down into the crypts. I'll go down and protect the people in the crypts. And Devil said, that would be great. She said, all right, I'll do that. And Gilly was like, I feel better knowing you there. And then they kind of smile, and she gives Devils a little smile like, hey, we work together. Meanwhile, we see the Night's Watch come back, and we see Ed, and Jon sees Ed for the first time in a long time. He about to go and give him a hug, but next thing you know, he sideswipe hug tackled by Big Red, Tormund, Giant's Bane, and then after that, he hugs up with Ed and Sam, and now all the Night's Watch is reunited, and he says, well, we all may be dying here soon. They're on their way. They'll be here by the morning. And so they get worried, and then he says, hey, is the big woman here? Because he wanted to climb up in that one last chance before it's too late. Meanwhile, they're putting the defenses together in front of Winterfell, and the troops are all getting prepared. And so then they go inside and putting together their battle plans, and you can see they got a huge battle ahead. And so they're saying the Night King approaches, and so they'll be here by morning. what does he want? And Bran said he wants to destroy the realms of men. He wants to kill me and the memories. And then Sam is listening, and Bran says, yeah, if he erases me, there is no more us. And then Sam said, yeah, if you want to erase men, that's the best way. You know the real truth. It's not just stories. And so he said, Tyrion said, how will they find him? And he said, his mark is on me. And so he showed the mark. He wants to erase the world and that he was the memory. And Jon said, well, the best thing to do is to take him down and the rest to fall. He said, no, I'll be out in the open. And Theon said, I'll protect you in the God's woods. And he said, I took this castle from you. I'll help you protect it. He agreed. And so then they was all deciding what they're going to do next. And then Tyrion said, I'll give the signal. And Daenerys said, no, you'll be there in the crypts with everybody else. He said, I've been in battles before. She said, if we survive, I'll need you. And then Arya said, well, what about Dragonfire? Does it work? And then Bran said, I don't know. Nobody's ever tried it before. And so Tormund said, we're all going to die here. At least we died together. And he gave the little look to Brienne. And Brienne looked like, this dude still shooting his shot till he died, ain't he? Meanwhile, everybody is deciding what they're going to do. And they said, let's get some rest. We got a battle tonight. And meanwhile, Tyrion said, you sure have had a hell of a journey. He said, yeah, it's a long story. He said, if only we were in the castle with nowhere to go and nothing to do. And so then they started talking. Meanwhile, we see the beautiful Misandry, and then these two little dirty kids run away when they saw her. And then Grey Worm come up and talk to her. And so he says, you know, I am loyal to my queen. I love my queen and I would defend her. But when the war is over, is there nothing you would not want to do? And she said, I don't know. I like to go to north and see the beaches again. He said, then I will take you to the beach. We will go together. She said, but my people, they're not violent. We can't protect ourselves. He said, my people, we are violent. We will protect you. And then they all smile or whatever, and they know they got a little match, perfect match. Meanwhile, we see Jon on the wall, just like the old days with Sam, and Sam is talking about how he's gonna protect them, and he like, you didn't tell her yet, did you? And he said, look, wait, Sam. He gave him the eye, and then Ed come up. He like, now our watch has begun. He said, Sam, you going in the crypt? He said, I can fight. I killed the White Walker. I killed the Thin. He said, yeah, well, it looks like we really are screwed. You got Samwell Tarly, lover of ladies, and the killer. He said, well, actually, you guys are the ones that screwed. And they all laughed. Meanwhile, we see Tyrion sitting in there with his brother, and they all talking. He said, I wish father was still alive. And Jamie looked like, ain't that some shit? What are you talking about? He said, well, just for him to see that his two sons are going to die in Winterfell protecting the Starks. He said, yeah, father would be pissed about that, huh? And then while they were talking, Brienne and Pod came in, and he said, hey, come here and join us. They said, no, we was just trying to get warm. He said, no problem. Here, have some wine. And Brienne said, Todd, that's not a good idea. The battle may break out any moment. And then she said, you know what? Half a cup. And so then he went on over to get that half a cup from Tyrion. And while he was over there, Tyrion filled it to the brim for him and gave him a little wink like, oh yeah, man, drink up, bro. And, you know, they were always good friends. Now it's Tyrion serving him the wine instead of Pod serving Tyrion. And so they all sat down, and they even Brienne, they said, why don't you have some? And she said, yeah, sure. And then next thing you know, Sir Davos and then Big Red came in, and he said, oh, I'm glad you're here. And she said, yeah, I'm glad you're here too. I mean, like, I'm glad you survived Eastwatch. You know what I mean. And he said, you want some wine? And then he said, no thanks. I have my own. He had a horn of sour goat's milk. And he said, so they call you King Killer. He said, Jamie said, well, I'm sure some people do. And then Tormund said, well, they call me Giant's Bane. You want to know why? And he went and pulled up a chair, and he said, when I was 10, I killed the giant. And then I climbed into the bed of his wife. And you know what she did? She suckled me at her teeth for 3 months. You know, that's how I got so big and strong. And they called me the giant's milk. That's what did it. And he gave Brienne the look, trying to turn her on with that. Then he started drinking his drink, and he's just a pure slob, caveman. And she just looking like, oh my goodness, disgusting. And he just slobbering and drinking the stuff all over himself, and everybody looking like, this dude is crazy. And he just slurped it all down real good and fast. And Davos said, you know what? I think I will have that drink. Meanwhile, we see the Hound up on the wall sitting there chilling by herself when Arya walk up and sit next to him, and he passed a little 40 ounce to her, and so she starts drinking on the 40, and he like, you used to never shut up. Now all you do is sit there like a mute. She said, well, I guess I've changed. And he said, yeah, I guess so. And she said, so what are you doing up here? You never fought for anybody but yourself. He said, yeah, well, I fought for you, didn't I? And then Ben Derek comes up and he like, how you doing? The Lord of Light has brought us all together. It's amazing what's going to happen. And then he said, you know what? Shut up. Before the Lord of Light wonders why he brought you back 18 times just for me to throw you over the wall. He laughed, and then he threw him the little drink. And then she got up and leave. They said, where you going? She said, I'm not spending my last moment alive with you two drunks. And then she walks off and goes back into the building, into the castle. And so she's down there practicing with her bow, when all of a sudden Gendry comes back with the spear he made for her. He said, here's your weapon. And so then she gets it. She said, so what did the red woman want with you? He's like, well, she took me and she wanted my blood. He says, why did she want your blood? He said, because I'm King Robert's bastard. And she was surprised when she heard that. And then she said, so she stripped you down and tried to take your blood. He's like, is that the first woman you were with? He says, I wasn't with her. She said, well, how many women have you been with? I wasn't keeping count. She said, so you don't know? Well, I do know. And she said, well, how many? And he says, well, 3. She said, you know what? I don't want to spend my last moments alive not knowing what it feels like. And she just jumps in and kisses him and starts stripping him down. And she said, go ahead, take your pants off. I'm not the bloody red woman. And she sees the scars on her that she had got when she was fighting with the many-faced god. And the girl stabbed her in the side. And then she pulls off her little clothes and get bucket naked and then hop on his little saddle and try to ride him into the sunset. Meanwhile, we see the other crew getting drunk in the hall. And so Tyrion says, how many battles have we survived? I think we all may live. And everybody laughed. And he said, no, seriously, everybody, we've all been in battles, Brienne of Tarth. And he said, you're not a knight? And she said, no, women can't be knights. It's tradition. Plus, I didn't want to be a knight. And Pod looked at her like, yeah, right. Why you tripping? And so then he said, you know what? Forget about tradition. If I was a king, I'd knight you many nights over. And then Jaime said, you don't need a king to become a knight. Any knight can make you a knight. Here, come here. I'll prove it. Come here, Brienne, if you want to be a knight. And she looked like, you playing with me, right? And he's like, no, come here. He gave her the look like, come here, I'm for real. And then Pod gave her the look like, go ahead, this is what you always wanted. And so she get up real slow and she walks on over there, and then she gets down on bended knee like Boys to Men. And then he pulls out his sword and starts touching her shoulders and saying, in the name of the Father and the Mother and the Warrior and all the little, code. And then he says, you may now rise, Brienne, Sir Brienne of Tarth, Knight of the Seven Kingdom. And then she smiled and damn near had a tear in her eye. And then Tormund clapping. He was the happiest one there for her. He was so proud of her, and everybody was clapping, and Tyrion and everybody. And so he said, here, Brienne, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And she was so happy and smiling, and everybody, it was a good touching moment. Meanwhile, we see Ser Jorah talking to Lil Mama, his cousin, and Lady Mormont, and he's telling her that he wanted her to be in the crypts. And she's like, I will fight for the North. I will not be there. We are done here, cousin. And then Sam was coming to talk. She said, you can talk. We're done here. And she walks off. And then Sam says, look, your father, He taught me how to be a man. He took care of me. This is my family sword. I want you to have it. It's Valerian steel. He said, "You sure about this?" He said, "Yes, this right here is too big for me anyway." He said, "Well, I wield it in your honor." And then he took the sword, and next thing you know, Sam walked off, and he said, "I hope you win." And next thing you know, they were back in there where everybody was drinking and celebrating, and they was thinking how they all may end up maybe possibly pulling everything off, and they were going over the victories and defeats that they all had. And Devil said, "Yeah, I've made it without knowing any combat experience." And he said, "Sing a song." And then Pod, nobody knew a song, but then Pod broke out sounding like R. Kelly. And while he was singing, we could see Sam laying with Gilly and his little big baby. And we could see Sansa with Theon, and they were kind of reminiscing on how they both got beat together and abused, and they got a special bond. She might have been giving him some if he had a wee. And then we see Arya then rolled Gendry to sleep, put his butt to sleep, and she's sitting there up thinking about the battle coming. And then we see Grey Worm getting everything together, and then he starts kissing Melisandre like it was the last kiss they may ever have. And so it don't look too good for him by the way they shot that scene. Then also we see Jon Snow, and he's in the crypt, and while he's in the crypt, next thing you know, Daenerys walks up, and she says, "So what are you doing? Who is this?" And he said, "This is Lyanna Stark." And she says, "My brother Rhaegar, everybody said he was kind, but he kidnapped and raped her, and I just don't get it." And then he said he didn't do it. He loved her, and he married her in secret, and she had a baby. And when she had the baby on the birthing bed dying, she asked her brother to take care of that baby and raise him as his bastard. "My real name is Aegon Targaryen." She said, "This isn't true. How do you know?" He says, "Man, my brother Bran saw it, and Sam read it before he knew what it was." She said, "If this is true, you're the new heir." And then the horns blow, and so they go up top to see what was going on, and Tyrion is already there on watch, and they see that the White Walkers are now outside the gates. And so now they both look like, "Oh man, we ain't got time to worry about that. Who's the throne to going to?" And so Tyrion is looking, he could barely look over the wall. They had to look through that little cutout, but he was able to see that now we see these dirty, rotten feet coming up. And it was one of the White Walker horses with one of the generals, and he had the ice swords. And so they were all standing lined up. But one thing we did notice is that we didn't see the dragon in that scene or the Night King. And so who's to say they may not be there? They may have split their forces. Now, who I think may die in the next episode, based on how much screen time they had in the last two episodes, is Brienne, Grey Worm, Gendry, Pod, Ser Jorah, Theon, Tormund, Ed, Benderic, and the Hound. And I'm going to put a question mark by the Hound and Pod, because I think that they still have a little more story to tell, since I believe the Hound is going to end up fighting his brother in Clegane Bowl, and I think Pod may still be around to save Tyrion one last time. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'll be looking for the comments. I also want to thank everybody that support my work at patreon.com. And also, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace.